6 in the morning, Baghdad, the 14th of July, 1958. 4 shells from a ground cannon have already struck the east wall of al-Rihab palace. The Royal Guard has not fired a single round in reply. Their commander was bought weeks ago. The patrol assigned to the perimeter was withdrawn before dawn. 3,000 soldiers of the 20th Infantry Brigade, men who were supposed to be marching to Jordan, surround the building with tanks and armoured cars. And the only sound from inside is a telephone ringing in an empty corridor. Crown Prince Abd al-Ilah makes the decision. No resistance. He orders the household into the rear garden and walks out first. Behind him comes King Faisal II, 23 years old, carrying a Quran in one hand and a piece of white cloth in the other. And behind the king comes Princess Nafisa, his grandmother, 63 years old. Behind her, Princess Abadia, his aunt. Behind her, Princess Hayam, Abd al-Ilah's wife. Then 2 royal guards, a Turkish cook named Abigail Razikia, and an elderly maidservant. 9 people in a courtyard the size of a modest garden, surrounded by men they have never wronged. A captain from Basra named Abdul Sattar Sabah al-Ibusi, an infantry trainer who was not part of the original conspiracy but who rushed to the palace on his own initiative, steps forward. He shouts at the soldiers, "Do not let these people deceive you." He raises a machine gun. Later, when the historian Safa Kulusi, who had been his university teacher, and asks him why, al-Ibusi will say, "All I did was remember Palestine." And the trigger on the machine gun just set itself off. Abd al-Ilah falls. Princess Nafisa falls. Princess Abadia falls. All 3 die where they stand. Faisal is hit in the head and neck but does not collapse immediately. Princess Hayam takes a round through the upper thigh. The dead and the dying are loaded into vehicles and driven toward the Ministry of Defence. Faisal II, the last king of Iraq, dies in the back of that vehicle, reportedly with tears running down his face. Somewhere on the road between the garden where he surrendered and the building where his uncle's corpse will be hung from a balcony before noon. He is 23 years and 73 days old. He has been king for over 19 years. His wedding to Princess Sabia Fazile was scheduled for the following day. Within hours of the gunfire in that garden, Abd al-Ilah's body is dragged through the streets of Baghdad, dismembered, hung from a balcony of the Ministry of Defence, and set on fire. Nouri al-Said, the Prime Minister who served 14 terms and who made the single decision that allowed armed soldiers to pass through the capital, escapes across the Tigris disguised as a woman in an abaya. He is betrayed the next day by his shoes. He is shot dead in the street, buried, disinterred by a mob, dragged behind a car and run over by municipal buses until what remains of him no longer resembles a human body. Princess Hayam, the only person shot in the garden who survives, is pulled from the carnage by soldiers from her family's tribe. She escapes Iraq in the 1980s, marries her cousin, has 2 children, and dies in Jordan in 1999. She is 66 years old and she never speaks publicly about what happened. Princess Badia, the king's aunt, watches smoke rise from the palace from a balcony less than a mile away. A blood-covered member of the household staff reaches her on foot. "They killed them," he says. "They killed the king and his family." Badia takes her 3 young sons to the Saudi embassy and stays for a month. Then Cairo, then Beirut, then Switzerland, then London, where she will live for 62 years without returning to Iraq. She died in May of 2020 at 100 years old, the last surviving princess of the Iraqi royal house. Her youngest son, Sharif Ali bin al-Hussein, was 2 years old when he was carried out of Baghdad. He grows up in exile in Lebanon and England. Ard becomes an investment banker in London, abandons finance in 1991 to work toward the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, and after the invasion of 2003 returns to Baghdad as a claimant to the throne. He founded the Iraqi constitutional monarchy movement. He ran in the 2005 parliamentary elections. He received 0.16% of the vote. He died in Amman in 2022, aged 65. His son, named Faisal, lives in London. Prince Zayd bin Hussein, Faisal I's youngest half-brother, who is serving as Iraqi ambassador to Britain on the morning of the coup, becomes the head of the royal house from his residence in London. He never returns to Iraq. He died in Paris in 1970. His grandson, Prince Zayd bin Ra'ad al-Hussein, was born in Amman 4 years later. He earned a doctorate in international law from Cambridge and was appointed United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in 2014, one of the most senior positions in the global human rights system. The dynasty that ended with a machine gun in a Baghdad garden produces, 2 generations later, the man responsible for defending human rights across 193 member states. Prince Ra'ad bin Zayd, Zayd's father and the current head of the Royal House of Iraq, is 89 years old. He lives in Amman. He has served as Lord Chamberlain of the Jordanian Royal Court for over half a century. He is 33rd in line to the Jordanian throne. He has never been permitted to return to Baghdad as a royal. If you're enjoying this, subscribing is the best way to support the channel. And it's free and it helps us keep going. The family that died in that garden descended from the Prophet Muhammad through 37 unbroken generations. Their ancestor was Hashim ibn Abd Manaf, the great-grandfather of the Prophet who gave the clan its name. For over 1,000 years, the Hashemites held the custodianship of the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, a position of spiritual authority that carried no armies and no borders, but that no sultan or caliph could afford to ignore. The man who turned that spiritual authority into a political dynasty was Sharif Hussein bin Ali, born in 1853 in Istanbul, where the Ottoman Sultan kept Hashemite heirs under comfortable surveillance. Appointed Sharif and Emir of Mecca in 1908, Hussein governed the Hejaz, the western strip of the Arabian Peninsula containing the 2 holiest cities in Islam, under nominal Ottoman sovereignty. He was small, white-bearded, and precise in his hospitality. He was also ambitious beyond anything Istanbul had planned for him. When the Ottoman Empire entered the First World War alongside Germany in November 1914, Britain needed an Arab ally who could destabilize the Ottoman rear. Hussein was the only candidate with the religious authority to call a revolt against a Muslim empire without being denounced as a traitor to Islam. Between July 1915 and March 1916, Hussein and Sir Henry McMahon, the British High Commissioner in Egypt, exchanged 10 letters, the McMahon-Hussein correspondence, in which Britain offered recognition of Arab independence across most Arabic-speaking Ottoman territories in exchange for an armed uprising. The boundaries were left deliberately vague. The word Palestine was never mentioned by name. McMahon later admitted he had no clear idea what he was promising. What Hussein did not know was that Britain was simultaneously negotiating a separate arrangement with France. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, finalised in May 1916, divided the same territories into French and British spheres of influence. France would take Syria and Lebanon. Britain would take Iraq and Palestine. The agreement was secret. Hussein would not learn of its existence until December 1917, when the Bolshevik government in Russia published the text to embarrass the Western powers. By then, he had already launched his revolt. The Arab Revolt began on the 10th of June 1916 when Hussein fired a rifle from a window of his palace in Mecca, the signal shot. His 4 sons led the fighting. Ali besieged Medina. Abdullah besieged Taif. Faisal, the 3rd son, then 31 years old, tall and slender in white silk robes, commanded the northern army that would become the revolt's most famous force. A junior British intelligence officer named Captain T.E. Lawrence arrived in the Hejaz in October 1916 and attached himself to Faisal as military advisor. Lawrence described Faisal at their first meeting as very tall and pillar-like, very slender. By the end of the war, Britain was spending £220,000 per month to sustain the revolt, and Hussein had roughly 50,000 men under arms. Faisal's forces captured Aqaba on the 6th of July 1917 and entered Damascus on the 1st of October 1918, hours before the British cavalry arrived. The peace shattered everything. On the 8th of March 1920, the Syrian National Congress in Damascus proclaimed Faisal king of the Arab Kingdom of Syria, a constitutional monarchy stretching from the Taurus Mountains to the Sinai. France refused to recognize it. At the Battle of Maïsalon on the 24th of July 1920, French forces under General Henri Gouraud destroyed Faisal's poorly equipped army in 4 hours. The Syrian War Minister Yusuf al-Azma died on the field. Faisal was expelled from Damascus on the 1st of August 1920. He had been king for 144 days. He arrived in London with no country, no army, and no income. Britain solved the problem at a hotel in Cairo. The Cairo Conference opened on the 12th of March 1921 at the Semiramis Hotel, convened by Colonial Secretary Winston Churchill. Among the roughly 40 delegates, Churchill called them his 40 thieves, were T.E. Lawrence and Gertrude Bell, the only woman at the table. Bell, an archaeologist and intelligence officer who had spent years mapping the tribal politics of Mesopotamia, had already concluded that Faisal was the only candidate capable of holding Iraq together. The conference's central decision was simple and imperial. Faisal would receive the throne of Iraq. His brother Abdullah would receive Transjordan. Their father Hussein would keep the Hejaz until someone stronger took it from him, which Ibn Saud did in 1924. A referendum was organised in Iraq. 96% voted in favour of Faisal, a result no serious observer believed was organic. Bell wrote triumphantly in a letter home, "We have got our king crowned." Few Iraqis had ever seen Faisal before his arrival. He spoke a Hijazi dialect that Baghdadis found difficult to follow. On the 23rd of August 1921, Faisal was crowned King of Iraq on a platform reportedly built from empty beer crates, in a ceremony where a British military band played God Save the King because no one had written an Iraqi national anthem. Sir Percy Cox, the British High Commissioner, read the proclamation. Now the temperature was 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The Hashemite Kingdom of Iraq, a country whose borders had been drawn by foreigners, whose king had been chosen by foreigners, and whose anthem didn't yet exist, began. Faisal I proved shrewder than the men who installed him. He inherited 3 Ottoman provinces: Mosul in the Kurdish north, Baghdad in the Sunni centre, Basra in the Shia south. That had never been governed as a single entity, and whose populations had no reason to consider themselves one nation. He governed them by movement. He visited the Shia holy cities of Najaf and Karbala, appointed Shia administrators to positions they had never held under the Ottomans, cultivated tribal leaders with personal audiences. Timon played the British against Iraqi nationalists with a patience that infuriated both sides. He negotiated the Anglo-Iraqi Treaty of 1930, a 25-year military alliance granting Britain air bases and transit rights in exchange for a path to full sovereignty. On the 3rd of October 1932, Iraq was admitted to the League of Nations, the first former mandate territory to achieve this. The population was approximately 2.8 million. The country had existed for 11 years. Faisal I died on the 8th of September 1933 at the Bellevue Palace Hotel in Bern, Switzerland. The official cause was a heart attack. He was 48 years old. His private nurse reported symptoms consistent with arsenic poisoning, abdominal pain rather than chest pain, and a rapid deterioration that followed no cardiac pattern. His body was embalmed before a proper autopsy could be conducted. The question of whether he was murdered has never been answered. He left behind a private memorandum in which he described his own subjects with brutal honesty, devoid of any patriotic idea, imbued with religious traditions and absurdities, connected by no common tie. He had spent 12 years trying to build that common tie. His death removed the only person capable of holding the project together by force of personality. His son, King Ghazi, was 21 years old when he inherited the throne, and everything his father was not. Where Faisal I was diplomatic and patient, Ghazi was impulsive, nationalist, and openly hostile to the British presence that sustained the monarchy. He installed a private radio transmitter at al-Zuhur Palace and broadcast inflammatory pan-Arab commentary in his own voice, calling for the annexation of Kuwait to Iraq and denouncing British imperialism. The British embassy regarded him as dangerous. His own prime ministers regarded him as uncontrollable. On the night of the 4th of April 1939, Ghazi drove his open-top sports car into an electric lamppost near Harthia Palace and died of a fractured skull within the hour. He was 27. No credible investigation was conducted. Suspicions focused immediately on Prime Minister Nouri al-Said and the British, both of whom had reason to want Ghazi removed. At his funeral, crowds chanted, "You will answer for the blood of Ghazi Nouri," in Mosul, and the fury boiled over within 12 hours. A mob stormed the British consulate and killed Consul George Monk Mason with a pickaxe. The Iraqi government paid £20,000 compensation to his widow. Over 30 years later, Ghazi's personal physician said publicly that he believed the king had been killed by a blow to the back of the head with an iron rod, and that the car crash was staged. The physician was not challenged. No one in Baghdad was surprised. Faisal II became king at the age of 3. He had no memory of his father. His mother, Queen Aliyah bint Ali, born the 19th of January 1911, daughter of King Ali of the Hejaz, became the most important figure in his early life, and she was immediately sidelined. The regency passed to her brother, Prince Abd al-Ilah, who was 25 years old. Oxford educated in manner, if not in fact, and unshakably aligned with Britain. Abd al-Ilah would control Iraq for the next 14 years. First as regent, then as crown prince, and his political instincts would prove fatal to everyone around him. In April 1941, 4 army officers known as the Golden Square launched a pro-Axis coup, installed the nationalist politician Rashid Ali al-Gailani as prime minister, and forced Abd al-Ilah to flee Baghdad at night aboard a British gunboat, HMS Cockchafer, to the safety of Amman. Queen Aliyah refused to leave. Conspirators demanded that she authorize Faisal's abdication. She refused that too. The boy was 5 years old. The British forces launched operations from the airbase at Habaniya on the 2nd of May and fought a 30-day campaign, the Anglo-Iraqi War, that ended with the collapse of the Gailani government and the return of Abd al-Ilah on the 1st of June. The 4 Golden Square generals were tried and hanged. The British did not forget Aliyah's courage, and neither did the nationalists who had tried to remove her son. During the war, the child and his mother were evacuated to England, to Grove Lodge at Winkfield Row in Berkshire. 143 of Faisal's wartime drawings survive in Iraq's National Archives. They show warplanes, bombs, killer robots, extreme fighting. And then, on adjacent pages, birds, flowers and pastoral landscapes. He suffered from asthma throughout his childhood, and he attended Sandroyd School and then Harrow, where his classmate and closest companion was his second cousin, Prince Hussein of Jordan. Both had been born in 1935. Both would be crowned on the same day. Both planned, even as teenagers, to merge their two kingdoms into something strong enough to survive the forces gathering against them. Queen Aliyah died on the 21st of December 1950 of intestinal cancer. Faisal was 15. He had lost his father at 3. His grandfather's legacy was contested, and now the person who had shielded him from a regent who treated the throne as his own possession was gone. He returned to Baghdad to a court run by his uncle and a country run by Nuri al-Said. And he occupied the space between them with the cautious silence of someone who understood that his title was the only thing protecting him. On the 2nd of May 1953, his 18th birthday, Faisal was sworn in as king before Iraq's parliament. On the same day, in Amman, Hussein was enthroned as king of Jordan. Faisal began his reign with what contemporaries described as good intentions and a seriousness of purpose that his father had lacked. He commissioned Le Corbusier, Frank Lloyd Wright, Walter Gropius, and Alvar Aalto to design public buildings for a modernized Baghdad. He was shy, highly intelligent, gentle, and chronically ill with asthma. At 16, he had written a book on judo and self-defense, printing 50 copies for distribution to other Arab leaders. And during a 5-week tour of the United States in 1952, the 17-year-old visited the United Nations, the Empire State Building, Fort Knox, and a Brooklyn Dodgers game at Ebbets Field, though he reportedly could not distinguish the two teams until an aide pointed out the names on their uniforms. But real power remained where it had always been. Abd al-Ilah, now Crown Prince, continued to dominate foreign policy. Nuri al-Said continued to dominate everything else. Between them, they had served approximately 14 terms as Prime Minister. Faisal's role was largely ceremonial. The country he nominally ruled was about to become ungovernable. Iraq in the 1950s was a country with enormous wealth and no mechanism to distribute it. In fact, the Iraq Petroleum Company, a British-dominated consortium that had struck oil at Baba Gurga near Kirkuk in 1927, controlled virtually all of the country's petroleum. In 1952, Iraq negotiated a 50-50 profit-sharing arrangement that replaced the old royalty of 12.5% and dramatically increased state revenue. Production climbed towards 700,000 barrels per day. The government channeled 70% of oil income into a development board responsible for infrastructure, irrigation canals, roads, bridges, public buildings, and the board built well. But the wealth reached landowners, contractors, and politicians, workers and peasants, who constituted the vast majority of a population that had reached 6.3 million by the 1957 census and saw almost nothing. The same feudal landlords sat in every parliament. The Iraqi Communist Party, which promised redistribution, grew powerful in the cities and the southern marshes. The country was not unstable because it was poor. It was unstable because it was rich, and the richness was visible and inaccessible. The Baghdad Pact, signed on the 24th of February 1955, initially between Iraq and Turkey, with Britain, Pakistan and Iran joining by October, was Nuri al-Said's answer to Soviet expansion. It was also his death warrant. Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser regarded the pact as a Western tool designed to isolate Cairo and destroy pan-Arab unity. He launched a propaganda campaign against the Iraqi monarchy that reached every radio set in the Arab world. When Britain, France, and Israel attacked Egypt during the Suez Crisis of October 1956, Nasser was transformed overnight into the hero of Arab nationalism, and Iraq's alignment with the invaders became politically impossible to defend. Uprisings erupted in Najaf and Hay. Martial law was imposed. When Egypt and Syria merged into the United Arab Republic on the 1st of February 1958, Faisal and Hussein responded 2 weeks later, by declaring the Arab Federation of Iraq and Jordan, with Faisal as head of state, Hussein as his deputy, and Baghdad as the capital. The federation existed on paper. It had no popular support, no unified military command, and no answer to the charge that it was simply two Western client states pretending to be one country. Inside the Iraqi military, a clandestine network called the Supreme Committee of Free Officers had been organizing since 1957. Its leader was Brigadier Abd al-Karim Qasim, commander of the 19th Brigade, born the 21st of November 1914 in a poor neighborhood of Baghdad. His deputy was Colonel Abdul Salam Arif, a charismatic Nasserist who wanted Iraq absorbed into the United Arab Republic. The Central Committee comprised 14 officers. By the time they were ready to act, roughly 150 agents had been placed across most army units. They needed only one thing: a reason to move troops through the capital. Nouri al-Said gave them that reason. As the Lebanese civil war worsened, King Hussein requested Iraqi military reinforcements. The Nouri ordered the 19th and 20th Brigades, part of the 3rd Division, to march along a route that passed directly through Baghdad. The American diplomat Morris Draper later described this as the first time in 40 years that the Prime Minister had allowed an armed unit to move through the capital with its ammunition. Nouri had spent his entire career preventing exactly this scenario. In July 1958, distracted by regional crises and confident in the loyalty of officers he had never bothered to know, he authorized it. Faisal II, meanwhile, was preparing for his wedding. His fiancée was Princess Sabiha Fazile Hanim Sultan, an Egyptian-born Ottoman princess. The match was described as a genuine love match, the first of Faisal's 3 engagements that was not a political arrangement. When the ceremony was scheduled for mid-July, he had ordered the renovation of a brand new palace as their marital home. The guest lists had been sent. The trousseau had been purchased. Sabiha was in Istanbul, waiting. Of all the royal families destroyed by military coups, the Romanovs, the Hashemites, the Libyans, which do you think fell the furthest? Let me know in the comments. On the evening of the 13th of July, the 20th Infantry Brigade, approximately 3,000 men, broke camp at Jalala in Diyala province and moved south through sleeping towns, supposedly bound for Jordan. At approximately 2:30 in the morning on the 14th of July, the column halted at Bani Said, 6 miles from Baghdad. Colonel Arif gave the order that changed the direction of the march and the future of the country. Instead of turning west toward the Jordanian border, the column turned toward the capital. The plan had 3 targets: the national radio station, al-Rihab Palace, and the residence of Nouri al-Said. The radio station was the first priority. Whoever controlled the broadcast controlled the narrative. By 5 or 6 in the morning, rebel forces had seized it. At approximately 6:30, Arif personally stepped to the microphone and read Communiqué number 1. He denounced imperialism and the corrupt clique that had been toying with the destiny of the people. He proclaimed Iraq a republic. He announced a 3-member sovereignty council. He promised elections. He urged citizens to liquidate the criminals and traitors. At al-Rihab Palace, the assault was led by Captain al-Ibusi. He positioned a ground cannon and fired 4 shells at the building. The Royal Guard offered no resistance. Their commander had been co-opted, and the Crown Prince had ordered the household not to fight. What followed in the garden has already been told. What followed after the garden had not. Abd al-Ilah's body was separated from the others. A mob, some soldiers, some civilians who had flooded the streets after Arif's broadcast, dragged the Crown Prince's corpse through central Baghdad. His limbs were severed. His stomach was cut open. What remained was driven to the Ministry of Defense, hung from a balcony facing the street, and set alight. NASA's Middle East news agency broadcast the details with satisfaction. Photographs circulated within hours. The body hung there for most of the day. And Faisal II's body was initially suspended from a lamppost, then taken to al-Rashid Military Hospital to confirm death, and buried that evening in a shallow, unmarked grave near the hospital. The new government understood that public knowledge of the beloved young king's desecration would trigger a counter-reaction. The remains were quietly concealed. It would be 2 decades before they were moved to a proper resting place. Nouri al-Said crossed the Tigris on the night of the 14th and disappeared into the city. A reward of 10,000 Iraqi dinars was posted. On the morning of the 15th, he was spotted in the al-Batawin quarter of central Baghdad, dressed in a woman's abaya, his face covered, moving through the streets on foot. He was identified by his shoes, men's shoes, beneath the hem of the abaya. He was shot dead on the spot alongside a companion. He was buried at the cemetery of Bab al-Mu'azzam. The following day, a mob disinterred the corpse, dragged it through the streets, hung it up, set it on fire, and drove over it with municipal buses until, in the words of a witness, it resembled pressed sausage meat. He had served as Prime Minister 14 times. He was 69 years old. The British Embassy was invaded and torched. Colonel P.L. Graham, MC, was shot dead inside. His body was never recovered. 3 American citizens were killed in separate incidents. Several Jordanian nationals at the Baghdad hotel were murdered. The total death toll across all events on the 14th and 15th of July was approximately 100 people. Princess Hayam, Abdal-Ilah's wife, whom shot through the upper thigh in the garden, was the only member of the royal family present at the massacre who survived. In the chaos after the shooting, soldiers from her tribe pulled her from the group of bodies and kept her hidden. She received medical treatment under a false identity. She lived quietly in Baghdad for decades, eventually marrying her cousin. She had 2 children. In the 1980s, as Saddam Hussein's regime tightened its grip, she escaped to Jordan. She died there in 1999. She was 66 years old. She gave no interviews and published no memoirs. Princess Badia bint Ali, born 1920, Faisal's aunt, sister of both Abdal-Ilah and Queen Aliyah, was in another part of Baghdad that morning. She heard an explosion at around 6 or 6:30 and jumped out of bed. She looked toward al-Rihab Palace and saw smoke. Faisal called her by phone and offered to send guards. She told him not to. It was the last time she heard his voice. A staff member arrived at her door covered in blood. They killed them. They killed the king and his family. When the children's English nanny asked what was wrong, Badia said, "They have killed my family." Badia gathered her husband, Sharif al-Hussein bin Ali, and their 3 young sons, Abdullah, Mohammed, and Ali, and took refuge in the Saudi embassy, where they remained for approximately 1 month. The new Republican government allowed them to leave. They travelled to Cairo, then Beirut, then Switzerland, and finally London. Badia never returned to Iraq. She published her memoirs in 2002 under the title Memoirs of the Heiress to the Thrones. She died in London in May of 2020. She was 100 years old. Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi released a public statement calling her part of a political and societal era that represented Iraq in the best of ways. No representative of the Iraqi government attended her funeral. Prince Zayed bin Hussein, the youngest son of Sharif Hussein of Mecca and half-brother of Faisal I, was serving as Iraqi ambassador to the court of St. James's in London when the revolution destroyed everything. He was 60 years old. He became the recognised head of the Royal House of Iraq on the 14th of July, 1958, a title that meant nothing in Baghdad and everything in the small world of exiled monarchists. He lived in London with his wife, Princess Faisal Zayed, then a Turkish-born painter who became one of the most significant abstract expressionists of the 20th century. Her canvases, Vast, luminous, ferociously coloured, hung in galleries from Paris to New York, while her husband received condolence visits from deposed royals. He died in Paris on the 18th of October 1970 and was buried at the Royal Mausoleum at Ragdan Palace in Amman. The Jordanian Hashemites treated his coffin as that of a king. King Hussein of Jordan learned of his cousin's murder by radio broadcast. He was 22 years old and had been enthroned on the same day as Faisal 5 years earlier. He ordered an immediate military response. Sharif Nasser bin Jamil led a Jordanian force that penetrated 150 miles into Iraqi territory before being recalled. Britain opposed the operation, and the Iraqi troops stationed at al-Mafraq in Jordan simply turned around and drove back to Baghdad to join the revolution. Within days, 3,500 British paratroopers landed in Amman to protect Hussein's own throne. Nasser predicted publicly that the banner of freedom raised in Baghdad would soon fly over Amman. The Arab Federation, the union Faisal and Hussein had built on paper 5 months earlier, was formally dissolved on the 2nd of August, 1958. Hussein survived. He survived 17 more assassination attempts, 3 wars, and a reign of 46 years before dying of lymphoma in 1999. He never forgot his cousin. He pressed Baghdad repeatedly for the proper burial of Faisal's remains. And then there was the man who fired the gun. On a Captain Abdul Sattar Sabah al-Ibusi, the infantry trainer from Basra, who was not on the conspiracy's roster, but who took it upon himself to lead the assault on the palace, was promoted after the revolution. He received no punishment, no trial, no consequences of any kind. 2 years later, the consequences found him on their own. He began describing recurring nightmares in conversations with fellow officers. In the dreams, Faisal II appeared in white clothes and asked, "Why did you kill me? Did I hurt you?" Al-Ibusi travelled to the Soviet Union for psychiatric treatment. It didn't help. On the 26th of November 1970, 12 years after the morning in the garden, he shot himself with a 5mm pistol. He was roughly 40 years old. The king he killed at 23 had been dead for over a decade, and the question from the dream was never answered. Badia's youngest son was named Ali, but the one who carried the dynasty's political ambition into the next century was Sharif Ali bin al-Hussein, born in Baghdad in 1956, who was 2 years old when soldiers carried him out of a country that no longer wanted his family. He grew up in Beirut and London, educated at Brumana High School in Lebanon, then Nottingham Trent University for a degree in economics, then the University of Essex for a master's. He went into investment banking in the City of London. He wore expensive suits. He attended functions. He was, by all external measures, a successful émigré who had made peace with the loss. In 1991, the Gulf War cracked something open. Sharif Ali abandoned banking and joined the Iraqi National Congress, the American-backed umbrella opposition coalition led by Ahmad Chalabi that was working to overthrow Saddam Hussein. His role was to represent the monarchist current, a current that most of the opposition regarded as irrelevant, but that some Western policymakers found appealing as a unifying symbol for a post-Saddam Iraq. After the invasion of 2003, Sharif Ali returned to Baghdad for the first time since infancy. He founded the Iraqi constitutional monarchy movement and began making his case. A constitutional monarch, he argued, could unite Sunni, Shia and Kurd around a figure whose legitimacy preceded the sectarian divisions that were already tearing the country apart. He warned that the Americans were relying too heavily on returned exiles who had no constituency inside Iraq. He predicted, correctly, and as it turned out, that empowering sectarian parties would produce sectarian war. He ran in the December 2005 parliamentary elections, the first full-term elections after Saddam's fall. His party received 0.16% of the popular vote. The result was not close. It was not a near miss that might have been reversed with better organisation or more funding. It was a comprehensive, undeniable rejection by an electorate that had suffered enough under one strongman and had no appetite for a hereditary ruler, even a constitutional one, even a gentle one, even one who was right about what was coming. Sharif Ali remained in Iraqi politics for several more years, serving on various consultative bodies before withdrawing to Amman. He died there on the 14th of March 2022, and he was 65 years old. Scholar Ali Alawi said of him, "He was a decent man who only wanted the good for Iraq." His son, named Faisal, the fourth generation to carry that name, lives in London. He has made no public claim to any throne. The head of the royal house of Iraq today is Prince Ra'ad bin Zaid, born on the 18th of February 1936 in Berlin, where his father was serving as Iraqi minister. He was educated at Victoria College in Alexandria and Christ's College, Cambridge, where he earned a bachelor's degree in 1960 and a master's in 1963. He was 22 years old when the revolution destroyed the Baghdad branch of the family. He has lived in Amman ever since, where he has served as Lord Chamberlain of the Jordanian Royal Court, the most senior position in the royal household, for over half a century. Queen Elizabeth II made him an honorary Knight Commander of the Royal Victorian Order in 1966. He is 89 years old. He is 33rd in line to the Jordanian throne. His Swedish-born wife, Princess Majda Ra'ad, died on the 3rd of January 2025. Ra'ad's son, Prince Zaid bin Ra'ad al-Hussein, was born in Amman on the 26th of January 1964. He earned a bachelor's degree in political science from Johns Hopkins University and a doctorate in international law from Cambridge. He served as Jordan's ambassador to the United States and as Jordan's permanent representative to the United Nations. In September 2014, he was appointed United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, responsible for defending human rights across every member state. He served until August 2018. He is married to Sarah Butler. They have 3 children. The great-grandson of Sharif Hussein of Mecca, whose revolt was funded by British gold and betrayed by French borders, spent 4 years in Geneva defending the rights of people whose governments wanted them silent. Other branches of the Iraqi Hashemite line are scattered through Amman, London and the Gulf. Prince Mered bin Ra'ad, another of Ra'ad's sons, has worked in landmine clearance advocacy. Prince Firas and Prince Faisal, his other sons, have pursued diplomatic and academic careers. The Jordanian Hashemites have consistently treated the Iraqi branch as family. Iraqi royals receive Jordanian citizenship. So they are addressed as His Royal Highness or Her Royal Highness. They attend state functions. They are buried in the royal mausoleum at Ragdan Palace alongside Jordanian kings. The 2 branches of the dynasty, separated by a coup in 1958, have never treated the separation as permanent, even if every government in Baghdad has. The material losses from July 1958 were total and have never been reversed. Al-Rihab Palace, the modest building where the massacre occurred, once was demolished in 1973. Nothing stands on the site. Al-Zuhur Palace, where King Ghazi broadcast his provocations, became one of Saddam Hussein's presidential residences. The grand new palace that Faisal II had commissioned and renovated for his married life with Sabiha Fazile, designed by British architect J. And O'Brien Cooper was completed after his death, renamed the Republican Palace, and became the seat of every subsequent Iraqi ruler. Qasim governed from it, the Arif brothers governed from it, the Baathists governed from it, Saddam governed from it for 24 years. After the 2003 invasion, it became the headquarters of the Coalition Provisional Authority in the Green Zone. It was returned to the Iraqi presidency on the 1st of January 2009. It remains a government building. The palace Faisal built for love is now the office of a republic that erased his name. No royal possessions have been publicly accounted for. The palaces were looted in 1958. They were looted again in 2003. No properties have been returned to Hashemite claimants. No compensation has been offered. No formal apology has been issued by any Iraqi government. What has been restored is a cemetery. The royal mausoleum in Baghdad's Adamiyah district, 3 turquoise domes designed by J. Brian Cooper and built between 1934 and 1936, houses the remains of 11 Hashemite royals: Faisal I, King Ghazi, Faisal II, King Ali of the Hejaz, Queen Aliyah, and 6 others. After the revolution, the mausoleum was abandoned. For decades, neighborhood children played football in its courtyard. The turquoise tiles cracked. The inscriptions faded. In the late 1970s, Saddam Hussein, who was reportedly fascinated by the young king's story, ordered its first restoration, prompted by a visit from King Hussein of Jordan. At that time, Faisal II's remains were finally moved from the shallow hospital grave into the mausoleum, beside his father and grandfather. A second major renovation was completed under Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi between 2020 and 2021, partly in anticipation of a visit by King Abdullah II. On July 2024, on the 66th anniversary of the revolution, a commemorative ceremony with Quran recitation was held at the mausoleum, attended by intellectuals, religious figures, and tribal leaders. A bronze equestrian statue of Faisal I, torn down by a mob on the 14th of July 1958, was re-erected by Saddam in 1989 at the end of Haifa Street in central Baghdad. It still stands. On the 22nd of May 2025, Iraq's parliament passed a new public holidays law that removed the 14th of July from the list of national holidays. The date that had been celebrated for 67 years as the birth of the Republic was quietly erased from the calendar. The Kurdistan Regional Government announced it would continue to observe the anniversary independently. No official explanation was given for the change. It required none. The growing nostalgia for the monarchical era, visible in social media, in newspaper columns, in the words of Iraqis who say openly that the country would not have passed through its tragedies if the royal family had survived, had become too widespread to ignore and too inconvenient to acknowledge. Princess Sabiha Fazile Hanim Sultan was in Istanbul when the revolution struck. She was 22 years old, and her wedding to Faisal II had been scheduled for approximately the 15th of July, 1958, one day after his murder. He had planned to travel to London that week to see her before the ceremony. She never became Queen of Iraq. She married Hayri Urguplu, the son of a Turkish prime minister, in 1965. They divorced. She married the French diplomat Jean-Alphonse Bernard in 1983. She lived between Istanbul and Paris. She died in Istanbul on the 27th of September, 2024. She was 83 years old. The palace her fiancé had renovated for their life together became the seat of every government that followed him. The Hashemites lost Iraq, but their cousins still ruled Jordan, and the Jordanian throne has survived 17 assassination attempts, 3 wars, a prince's attempted coup, and 77 years of predictions that it would fall next. That story begins with a single bullet fired in the doorway of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem on the 20th of July, 1951, when a 15-year-old boy named Hussein watched his grandfather, King Abdullah I, die at his feet.